If you're watching this video, you're probably trying to decide how to choose the right volleyball club for your daughter. And before we start comparing tuition, practice times, and tournament fees, I think it's important that we ask an even bigger question. What kind of environment do I want helping shape my daughter over the next several years? I think somewhere along the way, we started asking the wrong questions in youth sports. We asked questions like, how many tournaments do they win? What does their travel tournament schedule look like? And did my daughter make the top team? And I think we've lost sight of what youth sports really stands for and the value that athletes should be gaining being a part of any youth sports program. Finding the right club shouldn't be about finding the club that has won the most, or it shouldn't be about finding the club where your daughter can make the highest team. Because if winning becomes more important than skill development, if playing time becomes more important than learning, and if rankings become more important than building self-confidence, then I think we've lost sight of why youth sports really exist. I think finding the right club is finding the club that aligns with your values and gives your daughter the kind of environment where she will be challenged and pushed to become a better teammate, a better communicator, and a more resilient and confident leader. Those reasons are why Team One exists in the first place. And before I get into that, I want to introduce myself. My name is Brandon. I'm the indoor program director here at Team One. I've been coaching at Team One for over a decade. I started coaching at Team One when I was a junior in high school. And ever since I graduated high school, I've been involved in the program, learning about the business, continuing to coach indoor and beach. And over the last 4 years, being the indoor program director at Team One, I've been overseeing our indoor program as its entirety. My dad, Tay, is the owner and club director of Team One, and he oversees the beach side of our program. He's the reason why Team One exists to this day. So 17 years ago, before Team One had an indoor program, my dad was training a small group of beach kids. This is how Team One first started. He had a group of like 8 to 10 girls that he was just training over the summer. At the end of the summer, something unexpected happened. My dad never had any interest in running an indoor program, but the players kept begging him to start an indoor club. And he couldn't figure out why, and so he kept asking them. And through lots of questions and eventually lots of tears from the players, they expressed that under Team One's philosophy was the first time as an athlete they really felt cared for and supported. So that small group of beach players eventually turned into an indoor program. And over the years, our indoor program has grown tremendously. The beach side of our program has grown a lot as well. And through that growth, one thing has not changed. Volleyball is the vehicle, not the destination. And what I mean by that is Team One uses volleyball as a way to teach lessons and skills to athletes that they will use far beyond their years in volleyball. So I've spoken a lot about Team One's values, and I think our values really show up in how we make decisions and the types of decisions that we make for our families. There are a few key factors for us when making any decision for all the families within our program. I think one is considering the cost to value ratio of any experience, worry and concern about organizing the travel logistics of different events, if this decision supports the physical and mental well-being of our athletes, and ultimately, does this decision support the long-term growth of all of our players? I think one of the biggest decisions that really exemplifies our values is how we look at indoor nationals as a club. Going to AAU nationals in particular, I've had multiple families from multiple clubs express that the trip as an entirety has cost them about $5,000. So for Team One, we don't see the cost to value ratio of that experience. A second reason why we choose not to participate in indoor nationals is extending the season that long, I don't think supports most of our athletes physically or mentally. I think it kind of forces our players into playing volleyball all year round, especially indoor volleyball, which can be very taxing and grueling on their bodies physically, and during certain seasons, certainly mentally. So our alternative to indoor nationals is having our players participate in beach volleyball over the summer. And the reason we're such a big proponent of beach is beach gives their body the physical break from the game. I also think there's a really big aspect to a mental break from the game. Beach volleyball is 2-on-2 as opposed to 6-on-6, so there's no competing for playing time. You're playing all the time. You're working on all facets of the game, passing, setting, attacking, blocking, defending. And so I really do think it's a great way to not only give our athletes a physical break, but also a mental break. And to go back to the cost to value ratio, If the indoor nationals experience costs about $5,000, you could participate in 8 weeks of beach, you could take 10 indoor private lessons, and still have enough money to probably go on a small vacation with your family for the same cost of going to Orlando, Florida for 5 to 6 days as a family. Another decision and how we live into our values at Team One, something that we implemented last year was called our Happiness Scale Project. This project was set up to evaluate the happiness of all of our players over the course of the entire season. So I think a lot of programs talk about how they care about their athletes' experience, and we wanted to measure it. So at the beginning of the season, especially when teams are decided, our players are filling out some kind of survey for us to help determine their overall experience with their coach, with their teammates. As we begin tournaments, we're evaluating their overall experience within the tournament, how they're feeling about their playing time, and really allowing our athletes an opportunity to address any problems or concerns that they might have, which also allows us time during the season to make changes and make adjustments. Measuring the happiness of our players doesn't mean we're trying to make things easy. I think ultimately the questions are designed to really for us to have a great pulse on how teams are doing as a whole and how individuals on those teams are feeling throughout the course of the season. I think in order for players to grow, there really does need to be a great balance of challenge and support. And I think having this survey really allows us to make sure that we're finding a good balance of both of those things, both in tournaments and in practices. Something very unique about how Team One looks at player development is our hybrid training model. So last year we integrated that all of our players in our program, top to bottom, would be training in the sand for at least 1 hour per week. So there are a lot of reasons why we elected to have our players jump into the sand at least 1 day a week. A few years ago, we used to have a hybrid training model that was exclusive to some of our top athletes or players who were seeking out beach in particular. However, we saw so much value from them cross-training in both. Beach is a harder environment. We're forcing them to work on all aspects of their game. The sand is an unstable surface, so there's always counterbalancing that they're having to do. Their movement's challenged more. They have to take up more space. And so ultimately, we saw so much value in that we decided, why hide it from some of our players or why keep it exclusive? So that's why all of our athletes, for at least 1 hour per week, are being exposed to sand training. For the players who are very dedicated and really interested in pursuing beach potentially at the next level, we will have a 2-and-2 hybrid model available to specific athletes. That means that players will be training 2 days a week in the sand and 2 days a week on the hard court, as opposed to the normal 3 days a week in indoor, with one of those days being part-time in the sand. I think the final two areas where families really need to consider when evaluating what's the right club for them is overall coach development and coach to player ratio during practices, and evaluating total practice time over the course of a week. I think over the course of a season, who the coach is that's actually standing in front of your daughter 3 nights a week is way more important than the club name or how big a program is. So asking clubs about how they hire coaches or the kinds of coaches that they have in their program is extremely important. Speaking as a program director, I can assure you hiring great coaches is very difficult. And we're a mid-sized program, and certainly we struggle at times to find great coaches. So I know bigger programs have to struggle more to have an abundance of amazing coaches in their gym. Something that Team One has dedicated the last 10 years to in our indoor program is having what we call floating coaches. A floating coach can be seen as like a substitute teacher in a classroom. So during the course of a practice session, we have anywhere from 3 to 4 floating coaches who are just designed to kind of be an extra set of hands. So if there's a player struggling with a certain drill, we can have a floating coach pull that player aside and give them extra direction or extra correction in practice, as opposed to having one main coach having to oversee 10 or 11 players and not having that freedom and flexibility to like pull players to the side or give them extra attention when needed. We have a very extensive hiring process at Team One. I think something for us that's very important is if you're going to coach for us, especially at a high level, I think it's important that all of our coaches are able to demonstrate current volleyball skills. I think a lot of other clubs have much older coaches or hire moms and dads who maybe played volleyball 20, 30 years ago. And the volleyball 20, 30 years ago versus the volleyball today is very different. And so it's important to us that we have active coaches who are either still playing or still have a very large passion in continuing to develop their knowledge in the game. I think the final consideration when comparing clubs, and especially comparing pricing, is total practice duration over the course of a week. Certain clubs might practice 2 days a week, certain clubs might have practice for 2 hours or 3 hours, and certain clubs might have practices over the course of the weekend. I think in the case where clubs are practicing 2 days a week, or in the case where clubs are practicing during the weekend, I think both of those practice opportunities get very limited as the season goes on. Weekend practices tend to vanish, especially as we transition into our busy tournament schedule, and 2 days a week compared to 3 days a week is drastically different when it comes to development opportunities over the course of a season. At Team 1, all of our 13U through 18U teams will practice exclusively 3 days a week for at least 2.5 hours per session. The difference between practice duration, 2 days a week versus 3 days a week, will show up in the initial club dues. Most of what you're paying for up front in terms of the club dues is really the practices over the course of the season. And so that's a big factor when looking at different pricing of different clubs, is how often do they practice during the week. So if a club is going to mandate that you go to indoor nationals at the end of the season, just remember that that is an additional $4,000 to $5,000 fee that you have to take into consideration when comparing pricing between different programs. So in closing, thank you so much for watching this video. And also thank you for taking the time and consideration to really evaluate what's the best option for my daughter for this upcoming club season and choosing the right environment for her. Additional information regarding tryout times, tryout registration, and costs of the season and practice times can be found on our website, as well as additional contact information. If any parents, players have additional questions after watching this video, please feel free to reach out to us. I'd be happy to set up a time to talk to any families who are looking for more information about our program. We're very excited about this upcoming season, and we hope to see everybody at tryouts. Boom, done.